On the Dad Ventures podcast, we are all about enabling you to make epic memories with your kids. But between the daily grind and whirlwind of life, having fun, easy, and epic ideas on engaging with your kids isn't always easy. As a dad, balancing the daily grind with fun, memorable moments with your little ones is challenging. That's why I turn to the Dad Ventures deck, a deck of dad cards and kid cards, where every dad card is a surprisingly simple, outrageously fun adventure for you to lead with your kids, and every kid card provides a spontaneous, silly twist to the adventure. Just the other day, I went on a bike ride with my 5-year-old daughter. I took the role of Batman, while she invented a new superhero, Rosie the Unicorn. That little adventure was a blast. You too can have outrageously fun adventures with your kids that lead to unbreakable bonds and epic memories. Right now, Dad Ventures listeners get 10% off their order when they use the code PODCAST at checkout. Go to store.adventures.dad and use the code PODCAST for your discount. Make epic memories with the Dad Ventures deck at store.adventures.dad, promo code PODCAST. What skills do my kids need so that they can live fulfilling adult lives? My guest today took that question seriously. He created a list of skills he wants to make sure his kids master before they move out. I'm Aaron, dad of 4 and your host on the Dad Ventures podcast. My guest today is Kyle Jacobsen. Kyle is a dad of 4, from preschool age to high schoolers. I've known Kyle for years in a professional setting. I've seen his strategy of reverse engineering a goal, breaking it down into smaller steps, and then making a deliberate plan to achieve it. So I wasn't surprised when he casually mentioned that he had done the same for his goals as a dad. He listed out what he wanted his kids to know before they moved out. We'll dive into that and stick around to the end because Kyle describes a common problem that nearly every parent of a high schooler experiences. And he shares his unique solution that you can try today. Well, Kyle, welcome to the Dad Ventures podcast. We're glad to have you.
Thanks, Aaron. It's good to be here.
So, Kyle, what do you love most about your role as a father?
The best thing about being a father for me is that I get to figure out every day that I don't know what I'm doing. And it comes in varying degrees of complexity because I've got children of, from 5 all the way up to 16. So, my 16-year-old has problems that I haven't dealt with as a parent. And my 5-year-old, well, I should be better than I am already after having 4. But that's probably the best thing about it.
Does that ever get frustrating at all? Sort of like, I don't know what I'm doing? Or do you just kind of thrive on that problem solving sort of, you don't know what's going to come at you, so we're just going to adapt?
Yeah, it's the problem solving I actually kind of enjoy as a parent. I don't know what makes it enjoyable. I don't like that I've got to solve problems at certain times. There's expectations I have of my older children that sometimes they don't meet, and I don't want to solve those problems all the time. But it's my role. It's my job to do that. So if it's time for me to dig in and help solve the problems, I've got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some dads out there who are like, is that my role to really go and do that and to try to, solve problems and teach my kids? So like, how did you kind of have that? Where did that feeling come from of this is my role as a dad to be that coach, mentor, teacher, problem solver?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think when my younger children, when I was a new dad, I don't think I figured this out, Aaron. I didn't see it as clearly as I do now, and I think the reason why isn't because I've been a parent for so long. It's because I'm able to relate to my older kids a little bit better than I was now that they're older
Mm-hmm.
than I was with my little ones. For example, I'm recognizing mistakes that my teenage children are making that I made. And so for me just to reflect back on my childhood and think, wow, I made those same mistakes or I did these things and I remember how challenging it was or how scared I was or how overwhelmed I was in the moment. So I think that's what really kind of is the spark of that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you're mentioning, these are some of your older kids that are in their teenage years. They're a couple years out from, moving out of your house. And a few weeks ago, you and I were talking a little bit about what you hoped your son knew when he moved out of your house.
Yeah.
And you talked about sort of sitting down with the spreadsheet and just kind of creating this whole list of like life skills, even things as small as like how to use a pocket knife to other very large like life altering decisions. Like and so talk to me a little bit about that. Like what inspired you to sit down and actually write all of these things out of what you wanted your son to know before he moved out?
Yeah, it was the summer of 2022. My son would have just turned 14, so he's starting to get close to driving age, and I realized that he needed a lot more help than where he was in life, right? And so I sat down and I did some research as a parent to figure out what are some of the basic life skills that I need to teach my
Mm,
children as they get closer to moving out on their own, and where are they on that spectrum of being comfortable doing it. And so me kind of like, I love doing research. I go out, I start to kind of just Google as much as I can, and I made a random list of stuff, and I categorized it and I broke it down. There's probably 50 items. I broke it down month over month over month. So I'm supposed to teach my children one thing once a month. That's it. It could be domestic skills, money skills, driving, academics and career, healthcare. It really kind of, those are the main categories. But your point about how to use a knife, like nobody knows how to use a pocket knife, so I wanted to make sure that I was able to just take a few moments and teach my, at least my oldest son, how to use a pocket knife. But that really kind of grew out into all these other categories and all these other items that I've just been checking off as life goes by.
yeah, I love that. I want to dig into some of these categories, but before we do, I want to dig into your process a little bit. The research that you went through. You said you just started Googling things. Like, what were some of the things that? What were some of the sources that you turned to?
Kind of looking back, what I found as a parent is that there's no blueprint for being a parent, and there's no blueprint for teaching your children to do this thing at this time, um, or this is the appropriate time. And that's been really kind of the challenging thing for me as a parent. Is there's no place to really go. There's no one source to go and find. So for me, it was just mostly just Googling as much as I can, or just thinking about how have I spent my time in the last month, right? I had to work on a car, or, I got to learn how to fix a vacuum cleaner that doesn't work. These life skills they kind of come at you all the time. So if you just make little mental notes, in this case, I made an actual note of things that were happening to me, and I just started to plug it into a document so that I could do it, but I couldn't really find anything.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's probably the most challenging thing for me, Aaron. Is there's no blueprint, there's no way to do this, and so I just kind of had to find my own way.
Yeah, I love how you sort of reverse engineered that. You kind of took a minute to just observe your own life for a month. You're like, what were some of the things that I had to deal with, and could my kids, if they were in this situation as adult, could they deal with that? Like, I'm just thinking for myself. Like this morning, today, I had to call the government of the state of Utah for some customer support issue, and it was not very good. Like, you think of customer support at tech companies is not very good as a baseline. Well, when you call a government and you're calling their customer support, like, oh my goodness, it was horrible. And I'm like, oh, I had to use conflict resolution, clear communication, repeating, active listening, like all of those skills just in that tiny little 5-minute conversation. I'm like, how could I teach all of those to my kids and just make note of those things? That's really important.
It is, and I think one that came to me this morning was just being in a healthy. What does it mean to be in a healthy relationship? So that was one for me today that I'll be talking to the kids about this evening at dinner.
Awesome. What were some of the things that surprised you? I mean, you reverse engineered your own time, but what were some of those other external ideas that you maybe would not have thought of on your own?
Yeah, I think the things that were outside of what I had considered, I was looking through the lens of a parent who was I was asking, and this was really not good for me. It wasn't healthy for me. Was I was asking for my kids to quote do their job, and that for me meant get better grades or get good grades. That was their role in the family. But then when I started to kind of think about it, that it wasn't just about their academics. It was about making sure that um, they understood how to deal with healthcare issues. They knew how many aspirins or Motrins or whatever the cold medicine is, how to read an over the counter medication box. And it's those things that I think that was a big blind spot for me as a parent.
Mm.
I was really expecting them to just get good grades, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's more about being able to handle all of the other areas of your life and be responsible as a as a as a as a young adult.
Yeah. You mentioned healthy relationships before. You've mentioned how do you read a prescription or a medicine label? How do you use a pocket knife? Like, what are some of the big categories that you came up with as part of your list? You said there were 48 skills. I think you mentioned 50 skills.
I think there's about 50 skills that
Okay.
that I have, and as I mentioned, it was domestic skills. So you can think about domestic skills as, you know, assessing the way that they dress, their appearance,
Mm.
how do they present themselves to
Grooming.
others. Yeah, absolutely right.
Hmm.
I mean, when a teenager's not not happy about showering, everybody's not happy.
Yeah, exactly.
um, but then how to cook and prepare a meal, how to shop for food
Mm.
is another one.
Hmm.
I know those seem kind of maybe early in life, but I never really learned those skills until I was out on my own. And at that point, I was probably eating Burger King 5 days a week before I wanted to learn
Hmm.
how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Um, Other areas were money skills, getting a bank account, knowing how to cash a check, knowing how to get cash out, and when you would need cash. Um, Knowing where to find your routing number and your account number
Mm.
because you're going to get a job for the very first time, and how
Hmm.
to share that information with your employer. Healthcare. I mentioned reading over the counter medicine. Also, um, you know, avoiding pregnancies and STIs is one that we talk about in our family, um, probably more than anything else, because we want to make sure that they get off to a good start
Hmm.
in life. Also, how to make an appointment. When I remember the first few times I would ask my teenage children to say, "Look, why don't you just call and make the appointment?" It was like a look of like complete fright.
Like a
And
deer in the headlights. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
blood leaves their face. Their eyes wide. Yeah.
Yep. Other areas, driving was a big one. That's a really important one, right? It's all
Mm.
the way from learning how to get a license and all the requirements, because it is a little bit more complicated than maybe we recall. Um, how to fill up with gasoline, how to jump
Mm.
a car battery. I've dealt with jumping a car battery. This is a funny story. Less than a month ago, I taught my son how to jump a battery, and he drained his battery because he forgot to turn his lights off.
Uh-huh.
And then he crossed the cables.
Oh no. Oh
Yeah,
no.
and 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 he didn't tell me. So then I had to show him how to change a fuse after I
Yeah.
troubleshot it. And then I
Yeah.
said, "Hey, wait a second, Jack, did you cross the cables?" "Oh, Dad, I forgot to tell you." Like, well, let's talk
Yeah,
about
forgot. He
communication.
forgot to tell you. Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
awesome. Yeah, I remember I was a kid too, and my dad was sort of somewhat emergency preparedness minded, and he threw a pair of jump cables in my car at some point in high school. And I remember kids would leave their lights on in the parking lot all the time. And so I'd go around after school and almost every day or at least once a week, probably go and, okay, hey, do you have cables? No. Okay. Well, here's some cables. Let me show you how to hook them up. And he kind of taught me to do that. So yeah, that's a really good skill. And glad that you could apply that recently.
yeah, it was used pretty early in my son's driving experience, but those are the type of skills that I've outlined. And the interesting thing about this, Aaron, is that I've taken this concept and I've expanded it more into the academic side, because my older kids were struggling in school and I wanted to help them. And so I expanded even further into the academics area so that they knew what to do and when to do it. It was really more focused around
Mm.
around high school.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I really love that, and I think you've got a new app out that I want to ask you about in just a minute. But before we go
Mm.
there, what's the reception from your kids been? Have they really enjoyed these sort of life lesson talks? Have there been some resistance?
It when I talk to my kids about avoiding pregnancy and STIs, I get a whole bunch of yeah dads,
Hmm.
which is fine. I just want to continue to have a conversation with them so they know that I'm thinking about them and about that very important topic. So not a whole lot of discussion. They're not engaging in those type of topics.
Hmm.
However, when I said, "Hey, let's learn how to handle a firearm," they were like, "Okay, let's do this.
Yes.
What are we
Yeah.
going to do? What are we going to shoot at?" so
Yeah.
I think it really kind of runs the gamut. They don't really want to talk about how to get into college. They they kind of are
Mm.
looking just for a little bit of guidance. They don't want to talk about shopping for groceries or how to cook. They just want to kind of figure it out on their own. So they're looking for a supervisor in those moments.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, in fact, a month ago, my 13-year-old wanted to cook, and we said, "Great," and we had to help, which
Yeah.
was totally expected.
Yeah.
Well, just last week, he cooked 2 meals back to back, no help.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yes, it was fantastic because those are really stressful days for us as parents, and we sit down and have a great meal cooked by one of our kids who's 13 was amazing. It
Yeah.
was a really good experience, and um, he's starting to understand what it takes to feed a family
Hmm.
and the time commitment. So he's more appreciative of what we do every day. And at the same time, we were just thrilled to see that he was jumping and figuring out.
Yeah.
So
I love that you say, he's learning what it takes to feed a family. That kind of circles back around to the don't get someone pregnant conversation. Like,
yeah,
don't do this before your time. You
that's
gotta. There's a sequence to things in life, and
that's right.
you're learning that just through cooking a meal. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And have you found too, like, so some of your kids, some things they really want to dig into. Sometimes they just kind of want a supervisor for a little bit. What has kind of been your approach? Is your approach sort of been like kind of whatever they feel like they need at that time, or are you being maybe a little bit more? I don't know if aggressive is the word, but a little bit more like hands on, even when they feel like they don't need you to be hands on.
It depends. It depends on the topic, and it depends on which child I'm spending time with and trying to help. I'll give you a couple of illustrations. My 16-year-old son, he's always open to feedback. You can be more hands on with a lot of what he does. My 13-year-old son, it depends on how hungry he is because he tends to get pretty hangry.
Yeah,
so so I
yeah.
try and kind of manage that. But he also he really likes to do things on his own and learn his own way, and so he's he's open to try and figuring those things out. He's
Mm.
looking for less guidance.
Mhm.
My 14-year-old daughter, that one really kind of depends on how she's doing. Like if she's in a good mood, then yeah, I'm being a little bit more hands on is totally fine. But what I found with her is that her personality, she prefers to come to you when she's ready,
Mm.
and when
Mhm.
when she's ready, she's going to share stuff with me, and I need to listen and do my best to respond to say I heard what you said,
Yeah.
and how can I help you, and then see if there's anything versus trying to coach or um, teach grace. And she's a typical 14-year-old girl. There's nothing completely different about her. She's just a your run of the mill 14-year-old girl. But a couple of weeks ago, she had an interview. This is a great illustration, Aaron. She had an interview. It was the first interview, and she was so proud. And I remember saying, "Yeah, I'm so proud of you, like of this, what you've done. You've applied for a job. You've got your first interview. Let's practice."
Yeah.
And her response was, "Absolutely not," and just
Hmm.
walked away from it.
Wow.
And so I had to go back to her and say, what happened? What she needed was just like a hug and an affirmation that she had accomplished something. And then once we got through that, I asked her how I could help, and she said, "If you could just give me a couple of tips.
Okay.
I don't want to rehearse it. I just want a
Yeah.
couple of tips." That turned into more tips, which turned into a little bit of back and forth and kind of
Mhm.
pretending and acting out a fake interview. But that's it. Kind of depends on each of the kids how I approach it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's great. It's good that you can kind of read the room, read the kid's personality a little bit, and try a little bit and see how they react and sort of assess and adjust your strategy a little bit there. Um, that's awesome. Are you doing these life skills once per month for, a number of years? Are you doing these like individually with each of your 4 kids, or are some of them sort of group or family dynamics as well? Or maybe that's another it depends sort of thing. On the Dad Ventures podcast, we are all about enabling you to make epic memories with your kids. But between the daily grind and whirlwind of life, having fun, easy, and epic ideas on engaging with your kids isn't always easy. As a dad, balancing the daily grind with fun, memorable moments with your little ones is challenging. That's why I turn to the Dad Ventures deck, a deck of dad cards and kid cards, where every dad card is a surprisingly simple, outrageously fun adventure for you to lead with your kids, and every kid card provides a spontaneous, silly twist to the adventure. Just the other day, I went on a bike ride with my 5-year-old daughter. I took the role of Batman while she invented a new superhero, Rosie the Unicorn. That little adventure was a blast. You too can have outrageously fun adventures with your kids that lead to unbreakable bonds and epic memories. Right now, Dad Ventures listeners get 10% off their order when they use the code PODCAST at checkout. Go to store.adventures.dad and use the code PODCAST for your discount. Make epic memories with the Dad Ventures deck at store.adventures.dad, promo code PODCAST.
It does depend. I have just a list, and I'm not quite. What I've learned is that I actually set it out so that every month I would cover a new topic.
Mhm.
But what I realized is that these life doesn't come at you in that order. And for me to pause and say to my 16-year-old son Jack, before he's driving, before a year and a half ago, is to say, "Hey, let's learn how to read a map." He's going to look at me and go, "Why? I don't understand."
Yeah.
So I kind of am waiting for the moments to teach them. And, reading a map is one of them. And a couple of weeks ago, my son who's driving and he, he, he was late somewhere a couple of times and he said he keeps missing exits
Hmm.
on the highway.
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, I'm not able to like drive and look at the map." So I said, "Great, let's learn how to use
Yeah.
a map."
Now's the time.
Um,
Mhm.
so I'll jump into that with him, and it's all really kind of depends on what's happening in life.
Yeah, I love that. And just your explaining this whole thing, I have all of these skills lined out. I did this research, I have these categories, I have this sequence that I kind of adhere to, but adapt that according to circumstances. Sometimes my kids love it. Sometimes they're a little bit resistant. I can imagine there's a dad out there who's like, "Wow, I am not that intentional or deliberate as a dad." I f- and I kind of feel like if when the important things come up, then I'll be able to teach what those important things are, and if they never come up, then maybe they're not all that important. What would you say to that dad who kind of has a little bit of that less deliberate approach, shall we say, to what you're describing here?
Yeah, that was me, and it's totally fine. I think it's totally fine. Aaron, here's like it's life gets busy, and I get busy in my career to the point to where sometimes I feel like I'm neglecting others, and I don't know if I'm being a good dad or a supportive father or supportive husband or another family member. And so, me going through the exercise of actually putting things down, like pen to paper, just to make sure that we're in the last few years before they go off to college. Am I teaching them the right things? Are there other things I got to play catch up on? So I think it depends on how involved you are with your children. If you want to make a list, go for it. If you don't want to make a list, that's fine too. It's I just did it just so I can make sure that I'm covering the big stuff.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I didn't let my busy profession consume me, and I was trying to just kind of find a good balance there.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because there's the other extreme, and we usually see this in like movies, right? Of the stereotypical parent who's like got every minute of their kid's life organized from birth till like their death, like forever. And certainly we're not describing an approach quite like that, but just some thought, just some thoughtfulness in how you approach life skills with your kids. And I'm sure you've done this, but fast forward a few years from now, you're dropping some of those first kids off. Um, maybe they've gotten a new job in a new city. Maybe they're going to college. Maybe they've joined the military. But wherever they are, they're no longer in Kyle's house, right? They're now adults. Like fast forward to that moment when you are saying goodbye to them. Like, how do you envision your relationship with them? How do you sort of envision that moment?
I I don't know, Aaron, and it scares me
Mm.
because I get so much satisfaction about being around my children. So I I don't know how I'm going to handle it in the moment, but I'm excited for them, and I feel like the effort that I've made the last few years and kind of organizing my dad, lifestyle stuff that you need to learn.
Your dad's
Um,
strategy?
there you go. I feel like it's they're gonna be well prepared. But I know that the thing I'm expecting is there'll be lots of mistakes that are gonna get made as they enter adulthood, and I just got to be there as supportive as I can, um, and not I'm not gonna pick them up. I'm gonna let them fall at
Yeah.
that point for
Yeah.
sure. I kind of already aren't. I already am. I
Yeah.
just it definitely be different circumstances at that point.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta let them learn from their consequences.
Yeah.
So we touched on this a little bit before. You touched about, helping your kids do their job and sort of how you defined that before was getting good academics. Then you kind of expanded that out to this list of life skills. And now you've also kind of circled a little bit more around back to that academic side. And you've kind of noticed that there are some frictions, there are some pain points between, yes, go get good grades, like that's a high level goal, but even having to break that down to more step by step sort of thing. So explain that problem a little bit there, and also go into what your recent solution to that problem is as well.
So I got a junior in high school, and I've watched him kind of struggle like I did in high school. He was overwhelmed, a little scared, and I couldn't put my finger on it. That is until my daughter, who's a freshman, her fall season, her fall semester. That's when I started to like figure it out. They were overwhelmed,
Mm.
and um, that's when I really kind of jumped in and started to take action as a parent. Up until that point, my interaction with my children was your grades are your job, do your job. I'm
Mhm.
doing my job, and I still do kind of hold that mentality. It is their job, much like mine is to do my job, and my wife, it's her job is to do her job, and we're both providing income to the household. But for Jack and for Grace, it was really about grades, and I continued to say the same things. I would just yell at them and say, "Get good grades. That's it. That's all I ask you to do." And it got to the point to where I had to just take a good hard look at what was happening because it wasn't changing their grades. What was happening was just changing my heart, my my blood pressure, I guess,
Mhm.
my heart
Mhm.
rate.
Yeah.
So I took a look at kind of what they were dealing with, and what they had was, I think, what I realized is that my kids were overwhelmed, and they were overwhelmed because they did high school was challenging for them and boring for them at the same time.
Mm.
It's maybe not the most exciting thing for a teenager to do is go to high school. Not a lot of them
Yeah.
enjoy going,
Well, it's
but
not
then
Fortnite.
it's not. It certainly isn't. And and they would get they'd get bored with the content, but then at the same time they would get overwhelmed with all the other stuff. So my daughter goes to start high school, and she's asking me about questions she shouldn't be worried about. Like she said, mentions like, "Hey, I need a letter of recommendation." No, you don't. Not as a freshman. You need to get to know teachers. That's
Mhm.
what you should be focused on. And so there were these these issues that she was facing that I realized she was just overwhelmed. Me yelling, "Hey, you need to get good grades," was just driving her to this apathetic state where she just didn't care. Academic performance kind of went down. So
Yeah. But
I
hold
took,
on, hold on a second. Was
yeah,
it overwhelmed with just like overwhelmed with there's so much coming at me, or overwhelmed with I have all of these assignments and I don't have time to do them, or like
less about the academics. It's more about all the other stuff that should be happening in high school.
the life decision type of stuff?
There you go. Like
Okay.
you need to talk to your counselor. You need to make sure you select the right courses that are going to meet your graduation requirements.
Mm-hmm.
You need to make sure you join the right clubs or a club. Join sports, and it was hitting my daughter so hard that she was just kind of started to shut down. She'd go into her room, close the door, wouldn't interact, and I couldn't interact with her very well about any of this stuff because she was overwhelmed. She didn't know how to communicate very well. They're just they're just still
Yeah.
children.
Mm-hmm.
They're still learning how to communicate, and so they I could sense that they were overwhelmed, and so that's when I started to make a change in our family. The change I made was I went out and researched everything that a high school student should do, and it's a lot. But unfortunately, again, I didn't find a single source. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't find a place you could go to and download a checklist of all the things you should be doing and at the right time. And so I made a list, about 100 items that I was able to kind of just aggregate from as many resources as I could. And the list is broken down by grade and broken down by grade, organized by season. So fall, spring, and summer. And when I did that, I presented it to my kids and we started to kind of work through what they needed to accomplish. And at that point, I could tell like this just a total load had been lifted off their shoulders because they weren't worried about things that really were not important or critically time sensitive to where they were in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So for my son, who's a junior, we were able to focus on making sure he took the PSAT or registering for the ACT and the SAT. So that was great. We really didn't have to focus too much on completing college applications, which is, in your senior year usually, but they start to hear a lot about it in their junior year and they start to get a little bit worried about how am I going to do this? For my freshman daughter, Grace, we really focused on just acclimating to high school, getting familiar with what clubs exist. If she didn't want to join a club, that's fine. Like just get familiar with it, why you would want to join a club. And getting familiar with study practices and honing those skills in. So I started to implement this and I saw a big positive shift in their life and I started to share it with some friends. Those friends started to ask for it and say, show me what you're doing. And then I started to see a lot of interest in, I need this because my kids went through the same thing or are going through the same thing. I've talked to college students, I've talked to high school students and many, many parents. And eventually I decided to create an app designed for high school students and for parents that is just a complete, you can think of it as a high school planner or a checklist that a high school student is going to need to do. And it also gives the student the ability to capture all of their accomplishments and log them because they're going to need them at some point when they create a resume or they apply for college. So that's how I solved the problem. That was the problem that we were facing as a family. I built something, started to share it, and got a lot of feedback. And now we just recently launched an app. The app is called Gradeness, GradeNess. You can check it out. You can download it right now at gradeness.app. We're just starting to get some really positive feedback from users.
Is it in the app stores yet?
It is in the iOS App Store and the Apple App Store right now. It's in the Google Play App Store. We are in the final stages of beta testing, and we'll be turning that on for whoever's interested in downloading. And then, Aaron, keep in mind, this is great for parents as well. If a parent wants to download it, you can do it. And you can help your child through the process, or you could have your student download it, and the two of you, I would encourage the two of you to use it together. So you
Yeah.
can really kind of focus in on some of what's important about each of those things.
Yeah. Students can download this onto their phone and parents download it too. Are parents seeing what the student is seeing? Is there like a different view for the parents, or is it just sort of like the same list?
It's just the same list right now, and eventually we plan to. But by the way, the app is free. It's our first
Oh,
version,
perfect. Yeah.
so anybody can download it. If a parent downloads it, there's no way right now for you to connect to your children, which is why I would encourage you to do it, together.
Mhm.
But eventually we plan to offer family plans. We'll add more features, and make it more robust, and we'll eventually start to charge for the app. It's a free app now, and we encourage parents and students to download it and give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the website again?
Yeah, it's Gradeness, GRADENESS.app.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember seeing some of the early prototypes and some of the early screens of this and thought, that sounds like it's going to solve a huge problem. I only have one junior high student right now. So maybe I'll go download that and I'll have her give it a shot and see what she thinks of that. So sounds pretty cool. And I'm also looking forward to Kyle. You call this gradiness is what you're calling it?
Greatness, yeah, just
Greatness,
to
yeah.
achieve greatness
Cool.
is the kind of the play on term
Awesome.
is what we were
Cool.
working with. Yeah.
Well, I'm also looking forward to your future app, Dadness, where you take your list of life skills that you're teaching kids, your kids, and that you can put that out as a blueprint for us dads. I'd really appreciate that.
We actually we've started to add a lot of the life skills into greatness,
Oh,
and
perfect.
and as a parent, you can go and add your own. We call them activities. You can add your own activities. So if for example, if religion is a really big part of your family and you would like to add some activities that you want your child to accomplish, you can easily go add it to the app and then and track their progress, which is really, really powerful. So that's just one example of the way parents could use it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Kyle, thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation for me. I love your deliberate and intentional just approach to life, really. I mean, we've talked about it a bit as a dad, a bit as a high school student, the reverse engineering, the research that you do. I just really admire you for that. We've been friends for a while and just kind of admire your strategic thinking that you take to all aspects of your life. And I just admire that about you.
Thanks, Aaron. It's been great to join you today. I appreciate the invite.
Hey there, Dad. Are you looking for easy ways to strengthen your bond with your kids? I get it. Life can be hectic, but connecting with your little ones doesn't have to be complicated. I have a free resource for you. 10 incredibly easy ways to connect with your kids today. Packed with simple, research-backed, practical tips, this guide will help you create meaningful moments with your children, even on the busiest of days. Head over to adventures.dad/free download and get your hands on this invaluable resource today. Because the moments you share with your kids today will become the memories they cherish forever. Go to adventures.dad/free download to get this free guide today.